The sun was a dull, lifeless orange as it hovered low over the shattered skyline of what used to be Washington, D.C. Broken buildings leaned precariously, their glass windows shattered and streets littered with abandoned cars and debris. The once vibrant heart of the nation was now the epicenter of the undead apocalypse that had swallowed America whole. Captain Riley Hayes stood on the rooftop of a crumbling government building, the weight of his mission heavy on his shoulders. At 34, he had survived the worst days of the outbreak, losing more friends than he cared to count, but never his resolve. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon, alert to the slightest movement. Somewhere beyond the ruins, the undead horde stirred, relentless and unstoppable. Beside him, Lieutenant Mara Vega checked her rifle with quiet efficiency. She was younger, fierce, and one of the best sharpshooters Riley had ever met. "Any word from command?" she asked, her voice low but tense. Riley shook his head. "Nothing but static. Our radio's been dead since last night. Whatever was left of the military command is probably gone or overrun." His gaze darkened. "That's why this mission matters. We're the last organized team left with the resources to strike back." The small group of survivors gathered behind them was a mix of military veterans, scientists, and civilians who had fought tooth and nail for every day of their existence. They called themselves the Final Offensive, a last-ditch effort to reclaim America from the undead. Behind the group, Sergeant Jax Collins grunted, loading explosives into a backpack. "If we don't clear that sector, the undead will keep spreading. It's either us or them." Riley nodded grimly. The plan was simple in theory but deadly in practice: infiltrate the largest undead hive in the city, the old Pentagon underground tunnels, plant explosives to collapse it, and cut off a major breeding ground for the infected. "This is the tipping point," Riley said, gripping his rifle tightly. "If we fail, the undead tide will sweep across the entire East Coast. We don't have another chance." Mara glanced down the street, where distant groans and eerie shuffles echoed through the empty avenues. The dead were coming. Always coming. Suddenly, the silence broke with a faint radio burst. Static turned into a crackled voice, faint but clear enough to send a jolt through the group. "This is command. Any units, hold position, evacuation orders, repeat, evacuation orders." The message cut off abruptly. Riley cursed under his breath. "They're pulling out, or they're trapped." "Either way," Mara said, her eyes sharp, "it's up to us now." The group moved down the fire escape and into the shadows below. The streets were an eerie maze of darkness and danger. Buildings loomed like tombstones, and the faint glow of fires flickered in the distance. Every step was cautious. Every sound amplified in the silence. Suddenly, from a broken alley, a figure lurched forward, a zombie. Its eyes milky white, jaw slack, and movements jerky but fast. Jax fired first, a sharp crack breaking the silence, and the creature collapsed. But more emerged, drawn by the noise. Riley shouted orders. "Form up. Stay tight. Use the streets to your advantage." The group hurried through narrow alleyways, moving deeper toward their target. The tension was palpable. They knew every step could be their last. As they approached the edge of the tunnel entrance, Mara signaled for a halt. "Look," she whispered, pointing to a faint glow from inside the passageway below. Shadows shifted like ghosts, and the unmistakable groans of a larger undead congregation echoed from the darkness. "Welcome to hell," Riley muttered. They began their descent, careful to avoid debris and unstable ground. The tunnels were cold and damp, their walls slick with grime. The smell was thick with decay. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled slightly, a subtle warning that the hive was alive and restless. Deeper inside, they found evidence of the undead's rapid spread: walls scratched, discarded belongings, and the remains of anyone foolish enough to wander in. Their mission was more critical than ever. Then, a noise, soft footsteps, but not undead. Riley held up a hand. "Everyone, stay alert." From the shadows emerged a young woman, no more than 25, her face streaked with dirt and fear. She raised her hands cautiously. "Please. I'm with the resistance. I know the tunnels well." Riley exchanged a look with Mara. "Who else is with you?" "Only a few," she said. "But we've been fighting to keep the tunnels sealed off. If you're here to collapse this place, you'll need my help." Riley hesitated. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. But time was running out. "All right," he said finally. "You're with us. No mistakes." The woman nodded, her eyes steely. "Name's Alara. Follow me." The team followed Alara through winding corridors and hidden passages, deeper into the hive's core. The groans grew louder, and the feeling of being watched prickled their skin. Suddenly, the dead surged from the shadows, a wave of motionless but menacing bodies. The team raised weapons, firing with precision, but it was clear the horde was larger than they had expected. "We have to get to the detonator points," Riley shouted. "Split into pairs. Move fast." Mara grabbed Alara's arm. "Ready?" Alara nodded. "Let's end this nightmare." With a roar of determination, the final offensive launched their assault on the undead hive. Every shot, every step was a battle for survival. This was their last mission, one final push to reclaim a broken world. As explosions began to rumble in the distance, the group pressed forward, knowing well that failure meant the end of hope for dead America. The tunnels beneath the ruined city stretched like veins through a lifeless corpse, dark and suffocating. Captain Riley Hayes led the group, his boots echoing softly against the damp concrete floor. The stale air smelled of mold and decay, a reminder that these tunnels had been a breeding ground for the undead, hidden from the world above for too long. Alara moved swiftly ahead, her knowledge of the labyrinth proving invaluable. Her eyes flickered between shadowy corners and peeling walls, as if the darkness whispered secrets only she could hear. "We're close," she said quietly, "but it's going to get worse. The hive's heart is just beyond the next bend." Mara tightened her grip on her rifle. "We've already seen worse. Just keep moving." Behind them, the rest of the team formed a tight formation, their senses on high alert. Sergeant Jax Collins carried the explosives carefully, every step measured to avoid any unnecessary noise. The mission was simple on paper: plant charges at key structural points to collapse the hive and sever the undead's growth. But the reality was far more dangerous. Suddenly, a low groan echoed through the tunnels, a sound that sent a shiver down everyone's spine. The undead were awakening. "Positions," Riley ordered sharply. "Hold and wait for my signal." The group hunkered behind a crumbling support beam as figures began to shuffle from the shadows, twisted, slow-moving, but unrelenting. Their blank eyes reflected the dim light like dying embers. Alara whispered, "This is just the outer guard. The real horde is deeper inside." Riley's heart pounded. He raised his rifle and squeezed the trigger, the sharp crack of the shot bouncing off the walls. One creature dropped instantly, but more emerged, drawn to the noise. Gunfire erupted as the survivors fought their way forward. Bullets found their marks, but the creatures kept coming, relentless waves of emptiness with one purpose: to consume. Mara covered Alara as she darted forward, planting the first explosive near a rusted support pillar. "Charge set," she called out breathlessly. Jax moved quickly to the next point, but suddenly the tunnel trembled beneath them, not from the explosions, but from something else. The earth vibrated with unnatural force. "Something's coming," Alara warned. The survivors barely had time to react as a deafening roar echoed through the passageways. From the shadows emerged a massive figure, a towering undead brute, unlike anything they had faced before. Its skin hung in tatters, muscles grotesquely exposed, and eyes burning with a fierce, unnatural intelligence. "Get back!" Riley yelled, firing round after round, but the creature seemed almost unaffected, shrugging off bullets like rain. The team scrambled backward, retreating down the tunnel. The brute advanced relentlessly, smashing debris and sending shockwaves through the ground with every step. Mara fired a well-placed shot to its head, causing it to stagger briefly, but it wasn't enough. "We can't hold it here," Jax shouted, setting his explosive and racing back. Riley's mind raced. The brute was too powerful to take head-on, but it could be lured into a trap. Fall back to the junction, he commanded. We'll funnel it into the collapse zone. The team moved fast, using the maze-like tunnels to their advantage. The brute followed, its heavy footsteps shaking the walls and causing dust to fall like rain. At the junction, Riley directed Jax to place the final explosive. Sweat poured down their faces, the tension nearly unbearable. Almost there, Alara said, voice steady despite the chaos. The brute charged, crashing through the corridor toward them. Bullets tore into it, but it closed the distance fast. Riley grabbed a flare and ignited it, hurling it toward a narrow passageway. The bright light flared, catching the creature's attention. It roared and charged after the flare, just as Jax detonated the explosives. A deafening blast shook the tunnels. Dust and debris rained down as the passageway collapsed, burying the brute beneath tons of rubble. For a moment, silence reclaimed the underground. The survivors caught their breath, battered but alive. That was too close, Mara said, wiping dirt from her face. Riley nodded, eyes scanning the darkness. And it's only going to get harder. The hive's core is just ahead. Alara led the way through a narrow corridor that sloped downward. The walls became slimy, slick with something dark and sticky, undead residue that oozed from deeper inside. The team exchanged uneasy glances. This place was alive in its own terrifying way. Suddenly, the lights flickered on, dim emergency bulbs sputtering to life, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ahead, a heavy metal door stood ajar. Beyond it, the unmistakable hum of machinery. The old Pentagon's power plant, Alara said softly. If we take this out, the whole system could collapse. Riley signaled for silence. They crept closer, weapons raised. But before they could reach the door, a voice echoed through the tunnels, gruff, desperate, and unmistakably human. Wait! Don't come any closer. The team froze. A figure emerged from the darkness, a man, gaunt and dirty, holding a makeshift weapon. I'm Sergeant Barnes, he said, breathing heavily. I've been trapped down here for weeks. There's a way to shut down the hive's defenses, but I need your help. Riley stepped forward cautiously. Why should we trust you? Barnes' eyes flicked nervously toward the tunnels behind him. Because if you don't help, we all die. The weight of his words hung heavy. Riley glanced back at his team. Everyone was tired, scared, but determined. We don't have a choice, he said finally. All right, Sergeant. Show us what to do. As they prepared to follow Barnes deeper into the hive, the survivors knew this was more than a mission. It was a gamble with everything at stake, one last hope to push back the undead tide and reclaim their country. The dim light flickered overhead as Sergeant Barnes led the group deeper into the bowels of the old Pentagon's underground labyrinth. Every step felt heavier, the stale air thick with tension and a faint metallic tang that raised the hairs on the back of Riley's neck. He could hear the faint hum of machinery growing louder, an ominous heartbeat pulsing within the hive's core. This way, Barnes whispered, his voice low but urgent. We don't have much time before the hive's defense systems kick in again. Alara scanned the shadows nervously, her fingers twitching on the grip of her rifle. What kind of defenses are we talking about? Barnes didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned for silence as the group rounded a corner and approached a large steel door, sealed shut with a rusted keypad. This door leads to the control room, Barnes explained. If we can override the systems here, we can shut down the power feeding the entire hive, at least temporarily. That should cripple their ability to coordinate attacks for a while. Riley studied the keypad. Can you hack it? Barnes nodded grimly. I was an IT specialist before all this madness. I'm hoping my skills still work under pressure. The others moved into a semicircle, keeping watch while Barnes knelt to work on the keypad. Sweat dripped from his brow, and every tick of the seconds felt like a countdown to disaster. Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed through the tunnels, the hive was stirring again. Faster, Riley urged quietly, eyes darting toward the dark corridor behind them. Barnes' fingers flew over the keypad, inputting codes he hoped were still valid. Then, a soft beep signaled success. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a cavernous room filled with outdated computer consoles and blinking lights. Inside, Barnes gestured. "We need to get to the main console." As the team entered, the unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps echoed from the hall behind them. "They found us," Mara whispered, raising her weapon. Riley took point as Barnes made his way toward the central console. "Hold them off," he commanded. "We only have a few minutes." The undead were closing in, low groans growing louder, accompanied by the scraping of decayed limbs on concrete. Alara crouched behind a console, firing steadily. "They're coming through the east tunnel." Jax moved to block the entrance, planting mines quickly while shooting any creature that came too close. Despite their efforts, the undead kept pressing, a relentless wave with no end in sight. Barnes' fingers danced over the keyboard, working to override the hive systems. "Come on," Riley muttered, firing into the dark. "We need that shutdown." A sickening crash came from behind as part of the wall buckled, bricks tumbling to the floor. From the debris emerged smaller, faster creatures, unlike the slow, lumbering undead above ground. These ones were sharper, more agile, with razor-like claws that scraped the floor as they lunged. "New variants," Alara said grimly. "This hive is evolving." Riley gritted his teeth and aimed for the nearest attacker, pulling the trigger until his rifle clicked empty. He dropped the weapon and drew his combat knife, meeting the snarling creature's charge. Steel clashed against bone as Riley fought desperately, every muscle burning. Around him, the rest of the team battled just as fiercely, holding the line for Barnes to finish his work. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, Barnes leaned back with a tired sigh. "Got it. Initiating power shutdown now." The room shuddered as alarms blared. Lights flickered and died, leaving only emergency red lights casting eerie glows on the chaos. "Systems going offline," Barnes said. "This should buy us some time." Suddenly, the ground shook violently beneath their feet. The tunnels groaned, as if the hive itself was fighting back against the shutdown. Riley looked at the others, eyes wide. "We've triggered a failsafe." "No time to waste," Mara said. "We have to get out before this whole place collapses." Barnes led the group back toward the steel door, but the way was blocked by rubble. A narrow passage remained, but it looked unstable. "Help me clear this," Barnes said urgently. Together, they shoveled debris as fast as they could, the shaking growing stronger. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The undead were still coming, their snarls closer now, mixing with the mechanical whirs and groans of failing machinery. Alara shouted over the chaos, "The exit is just ahead." With a final push, they broke through the blockage and raced down the corridor. The tunnels behind them began to collapse, chunks of concrete falling like rain. Riley glanced back once, seeing the hive's power core explode in a burst of fire and sparks, plunging the underground into darkness. Emerging into the faint morning light, the team gasped, faces smudged with dirt and sweat. For a moment, silence stretched between them, an uneasy truce with fate. "We did it," Barnes said quietly, but his voice trembled. "At least for now." Riley surveyed the horizon, where the undead horde still swarmed, their grotesque shapes silhouetted against the ruined city skyline. "This is just the beginning," he said, voice steady. "We've bought time, but the final battle is coming." Alara lowered her weapon, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "We need reinforcements. And we need a plan." Mara nodded. "No more running. It's time to take the fight to them." The team shared a silent agreement. Dead America's last hope was alive, but the war was far from over. As the sun rose over a devastated nation, the survivors prepared for the fight that would decide humanity's fate. The dawn painted the shattered skyline in hues of gray and burnt orange, casting long shadows over what remained of the city. Riley Hayes stood on a cracked rooftop, scanning the horizon with eyes hardened by months of war. The horde still loomed, an endless, twitching sea of undead stretching as far as the eye could see. But today, the survivors would no longer just hide or run. Today, they would fight back. "We can't wait for the cavalry," Riley said, turning to his team. We are the cavalry. Mara's voice was steady but fierce. It's time to rally every last survivor, every armed soul out there. We need numbers, and we need firepower. Elara pulled out a battered radio, the crackling static filling the air. I'll send out a signal, code red. Anyone listening, this is the last call. We're launching a final offensive. Join us if you want to live. Jax checked his gear and loaded his rifle with practiced ease. It's risky. But we don't have a choice. The hive's power core is gone, but the undead won't stop. We need to hit them hard. As Elara keyed the radio, a distant explosion shook the city streets below. The survivors exchanged tense glances. The fight was already starting. Down below, in the heart of the ruined city, other pockets of survivors were answering the call. Flames flickered from barricades. Makeshift fighters armed themselves with whatever they could find, pipes, bats, old hunting rifles. The desperate rally was underway. Riley turned to Barnes. We'll need to lead the charge. Your knowledge of the hive systems could give us an edge. Barnes nodded, grim determination replacing the fatigue in his eyes. There's a chance we can disrupt their command nodes from the surface now. But we'll need to move fast and coordinate every attack precisely. The team prepared to move out, their gear packed tight, weapons loaded, hearts steeled for what lay ahead. As they descended from the rooftop and slipped through shattered alleyways, the city seemed to hold its breath. The silence was eerie, broken only by the distant moans of the undead. Suddenly, a figure darted from the shadows, a young woman, gaunt but fierce, clutching a makeshift spear. Wait! You're the team from Sector 7, right? She asked, breathless. We heard your broadcast. We've been holding out in the subway tunnels beneath the old hospital. Riley nodded. We're gathering everyone we can. We're planning a coordinated strike. The woman introduced herself as Maya, a natural leader hardened by loss. We've got about 50 fighters down there. We've managed to keep the undead at bay with traps and careful patrols. Mara exchanged a quick look with Riley. We need you with us. Your people's knowledge of the tunnels could help us flank the hive from underground. Maya's eyes flickered with hope. If we take back the city, maybe there's a future for all of us. The small group grew larger as they moved through the streets, gathering survivors like sparks drawn to a flame. Men, women, even children armed with courage and desperation. The ragtag army was forming, flawed, battered, but alive. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Hit the hive's remaining nodes simultaneously from multiple directions. Surface teams would breach the outer defenses while underground forces, led by Maya and Elara, would sabotage from below. As night fell, the city transformed into a battlefield. Fires burned in every corner, illuminating the undead as they shambled toward the growing resistance. Riley crouched behind a crumbled wall, watching as the first wave approached. This is it, he whispered. No turning back. The initial clash was chaos, bullets ripping through shadows, the screams of the living mixing with the guttural growls of the undead. But the survivors fought with desperate fury, fueled by a determination that no creature of death could break. Maya's team moved stealthily through the tunnels, setting explosives on key structural points. Their mission was to collapse critical hive passages, cutting off the undead's reinforcements. Elara moved alongside her, every step measured, every breath controlled. We've got one shot at this, she said quietly. Suddenly, a sharp noise, a metal grate sliding, alerted them. Figures emerged from the dark, undead sentries, faster and smarter than before. The small team exchanged fire, tension rising as the attackers pressed closer. With swift coordination, the survivors dispatched the sentries, but more were coming. We have to move, Maya urged. Back on the surface, Riley led the charge into the hive's outer defenses. The battle was brutal, every inch gained was paid for in sweat and scars. But the survivors pushed forward, driven by the hope that this might finally be the turning point. Then, a deafening explosion rocked the tunnels. The underground passages trembled and dust filled the air. They've set the charges. Mara yelled over the roar. The hive began to collapse piece by piece, subterranean tunnels caving in with thunderous crashes. Above ground, the undead faltered, confusion spreading among their ranks. The survivors seized the moment, pressing their advantage. Riley raised his voice over the battle cry. Push forward. For dead America. The final offensive was underway. The battle raged across the shattered cityscape as night deepened into a relentless darkness. The undead horde, disoriented by the underground explosions, staggered back but did not relent. Their groans echoed like a sinister chorus, a haunting reminder that death was always just a breath away. Riley's squad advanced cautiously through the ruins of what used to be the Pentagon's West Wing. Every step was a gamble, one wrong move, and they'd be overwhelmed by the swarm. We need to find the central hive node, Riley commanded, voice low but steady. Barnes, how much longer until you can trace the exact location? Barnes crouched by a battered communication terminal, fingers working feverishly. Almost there. The network's fragmented, but I can ping the main node's signal. If we can disrupt it, it might cause a collapse in their command chain. Elara kept watch, scanning the shadows with narrowed eyes. We're sitting ducks if those smaller variants find us again. Mara's grip tightened on her rifle. Then let's finish this fast. The team pressed forward, tension tightening every muscle. The flickering streetlights cast long shadows, and every corner seemed to hide a lurking nightmare. Suddenly, a shrill alarm blared through the city. Barnes stiffened. They've activated some kind of alert. The hive knows we're here. From the distance came a low, guttural rumble that quickly escalated into a deafening roar. Riley cursed under his breath. Brace yourselves. Here they come. From every direction, the undead surged like a tidal wave. But this time, the survivors were ready. Traps set earlier ignited in bursts of fire and smoke, halting some of the attackers. Mines exploded with shattering force. Bullets tore through the night air, thinning the horde, but not enough. Among the undead, monstrous figures moved with terrifying speed and precision. These were the hive's enforcers, larger, stronger, and deadly cunning. They hunted with a predator's instinct, aiming straight for the living. Riley engaged one, dodging a savage swipe of claws and retaliating with a well-placed shot to its skull. The creature collapsed, twitching violently. We're not just fighting to survive anymore, Mara shouted, firing rapidly. We're fighting for the future. Amid the chaos, Barnes' voice crackled through the radio, strained but urgent. I've found it, the central node's in the old data center, 3 blocks east. Riley nodded to the team. Move out. We take that node down, we cripple the whole hive. The squad maneuvered through alleyways littered with debris and fallen comrades, pushing toward the data center. The building loomed ahead, its windows shattered and walls scorched. Inside, the stale air buzzed with energy from flickering monitors and humming machines. Barnes wasted no time, plugging his portable terminal into the mainframe. Cover me, he ordered. Elara and Mara positioned themselves near the entrances, weapons trained on every shadow. Riley scanned the corridors, nerves taut. Seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as Barnes worked to breach the node's firewall. Then, the monitors flickered, and a series of red warning lights flashed. They're trying to shut me out, Barnes gritted his teeth. But I'm in. Initiating node shutdown sequence now. Suddenly, the ground trembled. The building's old foundations creaked under the strain of the hive's retaliatory defense. From the darkness emerged a massive hive guardian, twice the size of a normal undead, with armored plating and eyes glowing a sickly green. It snarled and charged. Get down! Riley shouted. The team scattered as the creature slammed into the wall, debris raining down. It turned its attention to Barnes, who was still at the console. Riley raised his rifle, firing shot after shot. The guardian howled but pressed on. Mara launched a grenade, and the explosion rocked the chamber, but the creature barely faltered. We can't hold it! Elara shouted. Barnes, hurry! With a final keystroke, Barnes activated the shutdown. The room filled with a harsh electric hum as the node powered down. The Guardian roared in fury and lunged, only to be caught in an electromagnetic pulse that surged through the data center, freezing it in place. "Now!" Riley commanded. "Fall back." The team retreated as the building began to collapse, dust and rubble choking the air. Outside, the undead horde faltered, disorganized without their command node. The survivors regrouped on a nearby rooftop, panting and battered but alive. Barnes wiped sweat from his brow. "The node's down. The hive's coordination will be severely disrupted, for a time." Riley surveyed the cityscape. "We've dealt a critical blow, but the war isn't over." Mara lowered her rifle, exhaustion and grim satisfaction etched on her face. "This victory, it's just the beginning." Elara nodded. "We need to prepare. Reinforcements, supplies, new strategies." From the distance, the first rays of dawn began to pierce the gloom, signaling a new day, one that might finally belong to the living. That's Part 5, keeping the suspense and action rolling with a dramatic breach and major battle moment. Would you like me to proceed with Part 6? The city was quiet for the first time in what felt like an eternity, but the silence was fragile, a brief lull before the storm. Riley's team gathered in a makeshift command post inside the gutted remains of a government building. The flickering light from a single lamp illuminated tired faces marked by weeks of constant fight and scarce sleep. Barnes spread out a rough map on a cracked table, the edges curling from water damage. With the central node down, the undead hive's communication network is fragmented. "It's a window of opportunity, but it won't last long." Mara leaned in, tracing a line through the city's ruins. "We need to hit the remaining nodes before they can re-establish control. But their forces are unpredictable now, some may scatter, others will attack with desperate ferocity." Elara tapped the map. "And what about the survivor groups?" Maya's team down in the tunnels reported increased patrols and strange new undead variants. "They're evolving." Riley clenched his fists. "We can't fight this alone. We need allies." The room fell silent. It was no secret that the survivors scattered across dead America were fractured into competing factions. Years of distrust and scarcity had bred suspicion, and alliances were rare and fragile. Mara broke the silence. "There's one group left that might answer the call, the Iron Wolves." Barnes nodded slowly. "They're a militia holed up in the industrial district. Tough, well-armed, but fiercely independent. Convincing them to join won't be easy." Riley stood, eyes burning with determination. "We have to try. If we don't unite, we'll be picked off one by one." The team prepared for the negotiation mission. Riley, Mara, and Barnes would approach the Iron Wolves, risking rejection, or worse. The industrial district was a maze of rusted factories and derelict warehouses, a perfect fortress for those who called it home. As they neared the wolves' territory, tension prickled the air. Suddenly, figures emerged from the shadows, armed, alert, and unwelcoming. A tall man stepped forward, his face scarred but eyes sharp. "You're Riley Hayes. We've heard the broadcasts. What's your business here?" Riley raised his hands, calm but firm. "We're here to propose a truce. The hive is weakening, but only if we fight together. Dead America can't survive divided." The man studied him, weighing every word. "Why should we trust you? What guarantee do we have this isn't a trap?" Mara stepped forward, voice steady. "Because if we don't unite, we all die. The undead won't care about our rivalries." After a tense pause, the man nodded. "I'm Kane. You have my attention. But trust is earned." Kane led them inside a fortified warehouse. Inside, the Iron Wolves leaders gathered, weathered survivors hardened by endless conflict. Riley laid out the plan: coordinate strikes on the remaining hive nodes, share supplies, and protect survivor enclaves together. The room buzzed with debate, some skeptical, others desperate for hope. Kane finally spoke. "We'll join you, but on one condition. Our people lead the assault on the southern node. It's close to our territory, and we know the terrain." "Agreed," Riley said. We need every advantage we can get. The fragile alliance was forged, not out of friendship, but necessity. As the teams parted ways, an uneasy but vital partnership was born. Back at the command post, Mara reviewed supplies and weapons. If the wolves are serious, we need to coordinate timing perfectly. Barnes nodded. Our window is closing. The hive's adaptability will only increase. Elara's eyes narrowed. And we still don't know what those new undead variants are capable of. Suddenly, the radio crackled, a voice unfamiliar but urgent. This is Echo Team, Northwest Sector. We've spotted a massive horde moving toward your position. They're faster, smarter, something's changed. Riley grabbed the mic. Hold your ground. We're on our way. The team sprang into action, moving swiftly to intercept the approaching threat. As they advanced, the first signs of the new undead appeared, twisted forms with jerky, unpredictable movements, almost like they were hunting. The battle that followed was brutal and unlike any before. The survivors fought desperately, adapting on the fly as the new threat tested their limits. After fierce combat, the horde retreated, scattered, confused. Breathing heavily, Mara looked around. This changes everything. We're not just fighting the dead anymore. We're fighting evolution. Riley nodded, resolve hardening. Then we evolve too. We'll learn their weaknesses and exploit them. The fragile alliance, the new threats, and the ticking clock set the stage for a desperate, final push. The alliance with the Iron Wolves had breathed new life into the survivors' fight, but it came at a cost. Trust was a fragile thing, threadbare and easily torn. Riley found himself restless in the uneasy calm that followed the brutal skirmish with the evolved undead. The wounds of past betrayals weighed heavy on his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking beneath the surface, something more dangerous than the undead horde. Barnes was hunched over the comms console, analyzing the data from recent encounters. The new variants are adapting faster than we anticipated. Their sensory capabilities are improving. They seem to be coordinating without the central node. Mara stood nearby, loading her rifle with quiet precision. If they're communicating, even in fragments, the hive isn't as crippled as we thought. Elara looked up sharply. We need intelligence. Scouting teams. I want eyes on every sector before we launch any more attacks. Riley agreed. And we need to watch each other too. The last thing we can afford is betrayal or missteps. That evening, a messenger arrived, one of Kane's trusted scouts. He carried grim news: a survivor group long thought lost had been captured, possibly turned, in a nearby suburb. More troubling, rumors spoke of a secret experiment, something that had gone terribly wrong. Kane's voice was grim when he delivered the message. If those rumors are true, it could change the tide of this war, for better or worse. Riley's jaw tightened. We need to find out. Mara, Elara, you're with me. We're taking a recon team out at first light. The sun barely crested the horizon when the small squad slipped into the ruins of the suburb. Buildings were crumbling, streets littered with debris and silent threats. At the edge of what had once been a safe neighborhood, the team found signs of a struggle: burned vehicles, makeshift barricades smashed apart, and strange markings scrawled on walls. Barnes knelt, examining footprints mixed with strange, unnatural impressions. These don't match any undead we've seen. Elara scanned the shadows. This place feels wrong. As they pressed deeper, a chilling discovery awaited: a hidden underground lab, half destroyed but still active. Inside, flickering lights illuminated rows of broken equipment and scattered documents. The air was thick with the scent of chemicals in decay. Mara's voice was low but urgent. What happened here? Barnes flipped through tattered files, eyes widening. This was a government experiment, a desperate attempt to weaponize the virus. They tried to create controlled mutations, enhance soldiers to fight the undead. Riley's stomach sank. And it backfired. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the darkness. From the shadows, a figure emerged, not quite undead, not quite human. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its movements were eerie, Unnatural. The creature lunged. The squad reacted instantly. Bullets tore through the air, but the being seemed resistant, shrugging off shots that would fell normal undead. Alara shouted, "We're dealing with something new. Something engineered." The fight was fierce and chaotic. The squad barely escaped with their lives, retreating through the wreckage and sealing the lab entrance behind them. Back at the command post, the team gathered, shaken but determined. "This changes everything," Riley said. "We're not just fighting a natural outbreak. There are forces here willing to play with fire, and now we're feeling the burn." Kane's grim voice echoed over the radio. "If those experiments are out there, we need to find them before they're used against us." Mara looked at Riley, a fierce resolve in her eyes. "We have to stop this, no matter what." Barnes nodded, fingers tapping rapidly on his console. "If we can find the source, maybe we can turn it against them." Riley took a deep breath, feeling the weight of command settle heavier than ever. "Then that's our mission. To uncover the truth, to fight the new enemy, and to push back the undead tide once and for all." The city outside lay in ruins, but the fight was far from over. In the shadows of the past, new horrors waited, horrors that could either be the survivors' undoing or their last hope. The revelation of the secret government experiments cast a long shadow over the survivors' fight. The undead weren't just mindless monsters anymore, they had evolved, twisted by human hands into something far more dangerous. Riley's team moved cautiously through the wreckage of the city, each step measured and deliberate. The fragile alliance with the Iron Wolves was holding, but the threat of these engineered creatures loomed large. Kane had agreed to share his militia's intelligence network, and together they pieced together clues about the location of other hidden labs. Rumors led them to an abandoned research facility on the outskirts of the city, deep within a quarantine zone known as Sector 9. "We don't know what we'll find in there," Mara warned, loading her weapon. "But it's our best lead." The team assembled at the edge of the zone, tension crackling like electricity. Beyond lay ruins, toxic air, and the unknown. Riley took a deep breath, staring into the hazy distance. "We do this for everyone still alive. No turning back." The trek was brutal. Twisted metal, crumbled buildings, and the ever-present threat of the undead greeted them at every corner. Their radios crackled with warnings and static, but the team pressed on, driven by a desperate hope. As they reached the perimeter of the research facility, eerie silence blanketed the area. The gate hung broken, and vines crept over shattered windows. Inside, flickering lights and the hum of malfunctioning machines echoed down dark hallways. The air was stale, tinged with chemicals in decay. Barnes scanned the corridors, eyes sharp. Sensors detect movement deeper inside. Could be more of those hybrids, or survivors. The group moved as one, weapons drawn, senses alert. Around a corner, they found fresh signs of life, footprints, makeshift camps, and hastily scrawled messages warning of danger. Suddenly, a muffled cry echoed through the halls. Riley signaled forward. They found a small group of survivors trapped behind a reinforced door, exhausted but alive. "We've been hiding here for weeks," one woman said breathlessly. "The experiments, they turned some of our friends into monsters. We're running out of supplies, and the undead keep coming." Mara quickly assessed their condition. "You're safe now. We're here to stop this." As they led the survivors out, the facility trembled, an ominous warning. Alarms blared to life, red lights flashing. Somewhere deep inside, a monstrous roar shook the building. "Trap!" Kane shouted through the radio. "They've triggered something." Riley's team raced back the way they came, pursued by creatures more terrifying than any undead they'd faced. These beings were faster, stronger, and eerily intelligent, hunting with calculated precision. In a desperate bid, the team barricaded a stairwell, holding off the relentless attack. Alara shouted, "We need to get to the roof, there's an extraction point." Climbing the crumbling stairwell, bullets flying, hearts pounding, the survivors pushed onward. Outside, the Iron Wolves awaited with vehicles, engines roaring. As they emerged onto the roof, Riley looked back at the chaos, the destruction, the battle-scarred faces of those fighting for one last chance. The extraction was perilous, but the team made it just as the facility erupted in a fiery explosion behind them, obliterating the lab and the horrors within. Breathless, battered, but alive, the survivors gathered around the vehicles. Kane's voice broke through the radio, steady but grim. "This is only the beginning. Whatever was in that lab, it spread farther than we feared." Riley's gaze hardened. "Then we have to be ready for whatever comes next." That's part 8, keeping up the suspense and introducing a high-stakes escape with intense action and revelation. Ready for part 9? The flames of the destroyed research facility still flickered in the distance as Riley and the survivors regrouped with the Iron Wolves. The city's skyline was a jagged silhouette against the smoky dawn, a reminder that the war for dead America was far from over. Kane's eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon as he addressed the group. That lab was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The virus, and whatever they were trying to create, has spread. There are more of those hybrids out there, and their numbers are growing. Mara tightened her grip on her rifle. "We can't keep running. We have to make a stand." Barnes nodded, eyes flickering over his tablet filled with data. "Our intel shows a fortified compound near the city center. It's one of the last remaining government outposts. If we can secure it, it could be our stronghold." Riley's mind raced. Holding the compound would give the survivors a base, a chance to regroup and plan a final offensive. But it would also put a target on their backs. "We'll need to move fast and hit hard," he said. "No mistakes." The plan was risky, an all-out assault on a heavily fortified position, surrounded by both undead and hostile hybrids. But desperation sharpened their resolve. As the convoy rumbled through broken streets, tension hung thick in the air. Every shadow seemed to twitch with unseen threats. Suddenly, the convoy was ambushed. From the rooftops, hybrid creatures lunged, silent, swift, and deadly. Chaos erupted. Riley barked orders, rallying the survivors. Bullets and shouts filled the air as the convoy fought desperately to push through. Mara covered their retreat, taking down attackers with deadly precision. "Keep moving. The compound is just ahead." The battle was brutal, but the survivors broke through the ambush and reached the compound gates. Kane's men blasted the locks, and they poured inside, sealing the entrance behind them. Inside, the compound was a fortress, barbed wire, barricades, and armed guards ready for battle. Riley took stock. "We hold this ground. Tonight, we fight for our future." As night fell, the undead horde and the hybrids gathered outside like a dark tide, relentless and unforgiving. The survivors fortified their defenses, every moment a race against the coming storm. Barnes worked feverishly to set up communications, trying to contact any remaining friendly forces. Elara patrolled the walls, her eyes scanning the shadows. "They're coming. And they're smarter this time." When the attack began, it was like a nightmare come to life. The creatures surged against the compound's walls, battering gates and clawing at barriers. Inside, every heartbeat was a drum of war. Shots rang out, screams echoed, and the survivors fought with everything they had. Riley moved through the chaos, inspiring those around him. "Hold the line. For every life we save." Mara fought fiercely, her resolve unbreakable as she faced the monstrous hybrids head-on. The battle raged through the night, a deadly dance of survival against impossible odds. As dawn approached, the survivors were exhausted but still standing. Kane's voice crackled over the radio, tired but triumphant. "We held the line. But this war isn't over." Riley nodded, sweat and grime streaking his face. "No. It's only just beginning." That's part 9, packed with action, suspense, and the crucial battle for a stronghold that could turn the tide. Shall I continue with part 10, the thrilling conclusion? Part 10, Dawn of a New Hope. The battle-worn survivors gathered inside the battered compound, their faces etched with exhaustion and grim determination. Outside, the undead horde and the hybrids had been repelled, for now, but the war had taken its toll. The once vibrant city was now a husk, a silent witness to humanity's desperate struggle. Riley stood on the rooftop, staring out over the broken skyline as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, sweat, and hope. "This isn't just a fight for survival anymore," he said quietly to Mara, who joined him at the edge of the rooftop. "It's a fight to rebuild. To reclaim what's been lost." Mara nodded, her eyes scanning the distant ruins. "We've faced the worst this world could throw at us, and we're still here. That means something." Inside the compound, Kane and Barnes coordinated the survivors, organizing supplies and fortifying defenses. Every person, every weapon, every scrap of hope mattered. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life. A voice, shaky but clear, came through, a distant transmission from another survivor enclave. "We heard your broadcast. We're coming to join the fight." Relief and renewed energy surged through the group. They were not alone. There were others out there, fighters, survivors, and believers in a future beyond the apocalypse. Riley's heart lifted. This is it. The final offensive won't just be about pushing back the undead. It'll be about coming together, building a new world from the ashes. But the fight was far from over. Reports came in that new hordes were forming, mutants were evolving, and pockets of resistance were clashing with unknown enemies. Yet, within the walls of the compound, hope grew. Strategies were forged, alliances strengthened, and the survivors prepared for the battles ahead. Mara approached Riley, determination shining in her eyes. "Whatever comes next, we face it as one." Riley smiled, the weight of command easing for the first time in weeks. Dead America's final offensive is just the beginning. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the battered but unbroken faces of humanity, the survivors stood ready. Against the darkness, against the odds, they would fight, not just to survive, but to live. The tide was turning. And this time, humanity would not be swept away. That wraps up the full story in 10 engaging parts, each with suspense, action, and hope, perfect for captivating your audience while keeping it monetization friendly for YouTube. If you want, I can also help with summaries, title ideas, or anything else for your content.